am so excited to be able to have this conversation with you. It's been a back and forth with you for quite a few years now,
Yeah.
getting to know each other. So thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I think as you know, like I've been a fan of the show for a long time, even before we became friends. So it's such a delight and an honor to be able to speak with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Laura. I appreciate that. And for everybody listening, Laura and I actually had this chance kind of meeting in Boston at one of the exhibitions. She had work in it. She came from Philly, and we ended up hanging out quite a bit that night and getting to know each other, and then just continued to stay in contact. It was so fantastic.
Yeah, it really was like we I did not expect to talk to you for as long as I did, and then just started emailing and sending articles or, whatever. So even though we've only hung out in person a few times, it feels like the friendship has a lot of depth to it, which is really fun.
Yeah, agreed. And Laura also even wrote the intro to a show I curated, which was I Spy a May Queen. She wrote an essay on it, which was fantastic, and I was thrilled to have you on that. And so it's nice to get to know you as a person, get to know your art, and then also get a sense of you through your writing, which I think can give another view of the things that we're interested in or a bit about who we are. So thank you again for that too.
Yeah, of course.
So, speaking of getting to know someone and their work and all of the things, I would really love to just start this interview learning a little bit more about your background, which actually I don't even think I do know yet, which is how you first became interested in the arts and started making.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think a lot of, I feel like a lot of artists have like a parent who was an artist or um, something like that. But I grew up in the Reading area, which is not too far from Philadelphia. And I'm really the only sort of artistic person in my family. My mom is a musician, she's a singer, so she has like a deep appreciation of visual art. Um, but out of all my siblings and my parents, I think they would say like I'm the only really creative, artistic one. Um, and so, I went to a very like academically rigorous school. They had a good art program, and my high school art teacher influenced me a lot. He really encouraged me to just spend as much time as I wanted to in the art room, and so by the end of my time in high school, I already kind of had developed a studio practice at my parents' home. They like let me, I don't know if they really like gave me the permission or if I just sort of was like, I'm taking over this room and I'm gonna make art here now. But I think eventually they just gave in and were like, she's gonna just have a studio here. Um, but that, that was really important to have that support early on, even though I don't know that I had quite as much of an awareness of the art world in a broader sense until I went to school. Um, and then I studied sculpture at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art. I went there thinking that I would do painting or drawing. I was doing like pretty, hyper realistic oil paintings. But then when I got to Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art, I realized that sculpture as a discipline really helped me to explore materiality in a way that I was interested in. Just it was a more experimental major.
Mm.
And so even though now my work really engages the wall hung work, I'm able to bring a very sculptural approach to it.
That's really interesting to hear because, one of the questions I have for you is that your work is very much about materials. I mean, you use drawing materials, resin, silver, glass, and they feel very process oriented. And I was wondering where that kind of came from, but it makes sense then hearing that you originally thought you'd be a painter and then was really drawn to sculpture because
Mm-hmm.
of all of those things that are still in your work right now.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share a little bit with us and take us back to the time where you started to explore the materials that are found in your work now, like glass? I love your glass
Yeah.
work. Beautiful. And it's something that I don't actually talk to many artists about. I don't
Mm.
run across a ton of glass artists that are making work like this. So can you tell us a little bit about how you first started using that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I was studying at a very classically based school. They do not have a glass program. They don't even have graphic design. Like it was very, very like studio based, classical, figurative work, a lot out of PAFA. But when I was there, me and my sculpture friends had this habit of dumpster diving, and we would find like the greatest materials. And um, I remember finding these massive architectural panels of glass in a dumpster outside of the Academy of Natural Sciences, which is right on the parkway there. And I just felt so drawn to this material. It was really magnetic. And you're in art school, you're kind of desperate for like identity formation. And I was like, I'm just gonna take all this like massive glass that there's no way I could lift one of these on my own. You need at least two people, but ideally like three or four. And so I, borrowed one of the carts from the school, and we wheeled it through the streets in the night. And we kind of like got a team of people where we're hauling it out of these dumpsters. And I took these pieces of glass and just leaned them against my wall in my studio, and they really filled it. And so I was laboring over these slabs of glass for a few months, trying to figure out kind of what is it that I want to do with this material? Why do I love it so much? Um, and through some research, I came across the work of Josiah McElhaney, who he is a glassblower. He did this exhibition where he was filling vessels of glass with silver, and he was like, "Oh yeah, it's really simple. You just kind of deposit silver onto the glass." And I was like, oh, that's it." And I think it was, you know, something I can articulate now that maybe couldn't at the time, but it was the way that I could manipulate the material in a way that was intrinsic to its properties. So I was manipulating those optics. So when you deposit silver on glass, you make it reflective. And so I had this idea of trying to deposit the silver partially so that part of the glass was reflective and showing your environment, but part of it you could still look through. And so I just began experimenting with this process of depositing silver on glass. And that really became the foundation of a lot of the experimentation that I've done over the last 10 years.
I have to say, I love the story and picturing these young art students finding these pieces of glass and the carts in the night and this group effort to move it. I love that. And I think something else that I love about this story is that sometimes we may find something we love, but we are afraid to embrace it because it's too big, or I don't know if I can do this on my own, and you're like, no, I'm gonna get this and I'm gonna figure it out and I'm gonna run with it. And so I think that's like a big strength to hear about. And then learning how to add silver to it and just
Mm.
putting yourself out there in order to learn and almost kind of dance with this material, to figure out how it's going to work for you and what it's capable of. Um, I would love to hear what a day in the studio looks like for you now that you understand the material a little bit more and you have this great space. I love seeing on your site and over on Instagram just installation shots. It's beautiful. I will visit soon. But yeah, tell us what that's like for you.
Yeah, so um, right now, a lot of my mornings I will spend reading and writing. It's just kind of how, like, I feel like my brain is working best in the morning for those sort of intellectual tasks and emails and things like that. And I try to dedicate my afternoon to more kind of time sensitive work where um, things end up taking longer than you expect, or you're experimenting and you can kind of let the works pivot and take that intellectual space that you need to really think about what the work needs and how it's going to evolve best. Um, but it really does depend day to day. There's just a huge variation depending on what I'm working on. Usually there's a number of different pieces going on at once. Um, Unless it's something really, really large that's taking up almost the entire studio, which does sometimes happen. Um, but I do enjoy working on multiple pieces at once. I think it helps me to put something on hold when I don't know where it's going to go next. And often I find that another piece that I'm working on helps me to find the solution to its partner pieces. Um, yeah.
Great, great. I have a question too, because I'm not as familiar with glasswork as, painting, drawing, sculpture, that type of thing. When you're manipulating the glass, can you do that in your own space, or do you have to go to like a glass studio of sorts? Is there a back and forth that happens there, or is it all something that you can work on in one space?
So it's all in my studio. I do like what you would call like cold processes. I'm not doing any like glass blowing. I'm not working with kilns even. I am really um, just working with chemicals. And so as long as I have good ventilation, then I can do that work in the studio. I do have a sink, which is great. And um, yeah, it all happens right there.
I love this idea. Again, because glass is not something I work with of chemicals, and that makes sense. I'm imagining like this pouring process that would create a type of reaction and potentially painting it on areas and like I don't know, etching, like these different things that could occur that also speak to your work because it feels like drawing is also important in your pieces. Can you talk a little bit about that, about the impact of drawing on your work?
Yeah, I think drawing is really significant for me. I think that drawings really show the way that an artist thinks. So, I do find my works on paper to be very significant, and there is a um, relationship where the works on paper affect the glasswork, and the glasswork does the same for the works on paper. Um, I think that uh, it's interesting that you say drawing because I think with my glasswork, there's such a sense of like assemblage. Um, and, I'm creating this painting on mylar um, that is separate from the silver on glass part. And then I merge these things. So I'm kind of I'm unrolling a mylar painting into the glass surface. And then we'll often cut and peel away pieces, or I'll cut out parts of that painting to expose the silver beneath. So there's this whole interplay of like how the silver and glass are coming through this translucent painting, whether it's through um, the actual translucency of the mylar or these more aggressive excavations of the composition that I'm doing through hand cut X-Acto knife incision. So I think the thing that feels most like drawing to me in that process is the cutouts, which I'm doing with an X-Acto knife. And there's a lot of kind of push and pull with taking my own hand out of the process and then putting my own hand back into it. And so the drawing piece, or the putting my own hand back into it, is when I'm cutting out part of the composition. And that can be sometimes the most challenging part, to know, what am I going to take out? What am I going to sacrifice and excavate in order to make this composition more compelling? And I think that there can be a lot of just tension there, because sometimes you have to take out something in a composition that you really love in order to make it successful overall. But yeah, I would say drawing is very much a part of the cutouts of the piece.
I I love that. I love hearing about that and how there's this back and forth, the assemblage, almost like a collage of sorts that's occurring. And what I love is that your hand feels so evident in all the work. And there's this freshness um that occurs where I can feel a mark being made, even though there's like this whole process that's pushing it forward. Or I can feel like the paint almost moving in them, which is just really, really beautiful. I'm looking at your website now, and everybody listening, you guys will be sharing lots of Laura's work over on the site and over on Instagram, so you can check it out. My next question that I would love to hear about is a little bit about the color, the palette of the pieces. There's this freshness, and you do shift between kind of more earth tones to something that is a little bit more filled with, these bright colors that peek through. Can you just talk a little bit about the color and how you select that for your work?
Sure. Um, it's partially dependent on, whether I'm developing work or a body of work for a show, or if I'm working on a commission for a site specific piece. So if I'm doing something site specific, a lot of what I'm doing is looking at the space that piece is going to go in. And, um, I very much enjoy the process of considering, how is the light filtering into this space? What else is going on here? And not necessarily like I'm going to match it to your couch, but there is a certain feel to a space, and allowing your art to be happily situated where it's going to live, I think um, is a good thing to want to do, and on commissions that is important. But if I'm developing a body of work, the way that I choose color often is very intuitive. And I try to not get too cerebral about why I'm choosing certain colors, because I do often find that I'm sort of extrapolating from memories. And that becomes evident often later on. So, for example, um, I went to Columbia a few months before my last solo show at Massey Klein, and there was one big final piece that I had done, and I ended up going with this like lush green with light blue palette, and the cutouts that I did almost looked like vines. And in retrospect, I realized that I was very much influenced by my time in Cartagena, where there's just like these balconies that are billowing with vines and lush greenery. And, that was something that just came into the work um, because of my experience. So I think that um, that's just something that I become more and more aware of over time, the way that place really does kind of embed itself in me. And then I can trust that that will come out in the work and can pay closer attention now to those experiences for the work. And so color selection kind of is a part of the many choices that um, I sort of am aware of, but trying to be let my intuition lead as well.
Mm. I love this idea of place and how, as visual people, the things that we experience embed themselves almost into our subconscious, and we begin to create forms that reference, where you've been, or where you live, the urban environment, whatever it might be. And I think that's really beautiful, in hearing how that can impact color selections in your work as well. I would love to hear more about your site-specific pieces as well. I know a lot of listeners are always interested in learning a little bit about how artists go about making that work, or how they first got into it. So can you tell us a little bit about how that type of work started for you, and how you continue to kind of keep your finger on the pulse of it and continue making that work?
Sure. Yeah. I got into doing public work sort of accidentally. I think my the materials that I work with sort of lend themselves to that, in that they're glass. And I have had um, art advisors reach out to me through my website, or they maybe find me on Instagram, but I do find that a lot of these leads are from online. Some of them are from people who I meet at events in person, but I would say the bulk of them are like from the internet. So I think that are a number of art advisors now, and this is becoming more and more prevalent, who specialize in sort of hospitality settings, more corporate spaces. Um, so, I've been able to do an installation for an airport. Um, I've recently just did a piece for Jefferson Hospital, which was a really rewarding project. And I think the way that I uh, kind of maintain that is I'll just make sure that those advisors are aware of, the way that my work continues to develop. I had a pretty drastic shift in my process motif in like early to mid 2021. And I sent out a number of samples to art advisors um, maybe a year after that, just to make sure that they were aware of what the work is like in person, just really small samples to those advisors. And I find that it helps just to touch base, and they really do want to hear from you. They really do want to kind of see what you're up to. And so I've found that to be helpful, just to reach out every now and then.
I think this is incredibly helpful for people that are interested in this. I know with our membership in the works, we have a lot of artists who are interested in pursuing this to support their practice. Of
Yeah.
course, we'll have to make a living one way or another. And this seems like a really wonderful way. So I guess my last question regarding that is, when you send these samples out, are these actual like tangible samples of like oh, beautiful. That's very
Yeah, they are.
cool. I love that.
Yeah, so I think for me, like, I think some people's work is conveyed so well digitally. I just do not feel that way about my work at all. Um I think I so often when people see my work for the first time after viewing it digitally, they're like, "Oh, I really was not reading this correctly. Like, this is totally different." in person.
Seeing your
And
work in person is so true at that show in Boston. And then at Massey Klein, I was like, oh, I mean, you're right. It's the nature of your work and the reflection. And when I shift to the left and I shift to the right, and that's the beauty in it. So you're right. That's so true.
yeah, yeah. So I think for me, that's a particular, um, you know, it's a good problem to have to solve, really. It's a really good thing to be like, oh, you wouldn't want your work to be like when you see it in person, it's actually like not that great, you know? Like it's better digitally. So it's a
100%.
yeah, it's a good problem to have, but it is something to, it's a little bit of a hurdle. So I think that's for me why I have found sending small samples can help people kind of turn it in their hand, see the materiality of it, and why this is, um, something that can really alter a space and bring light in, and can change the whole personality of a room. But I think, yeah, if you're an artist whose work is so experiential, it might be worth, um, thinking about some small samples or ways to get people to see your work in person. If it's like open studio events or something like that.
Mm, that's such great advice. I think you also do a really great job in showing some video of your work where, at least we can start to see how that shift in where we locate ourselves in, in response to the piece can change how we experience it. So that's something I love seeing on your site and things that you share on Instagram so that we can get a better sense of what it is. And again, great problem to have. Much better than the reverse.
Yes.
um, so you're doing all these things. You have these exhibitions, you are creating these site-specific pieces and commissions. You have a very, very lively studio practice and life surrounding your artwork. And I know that you have some new news, some things on the front that is happening. So I thought I would give you a chance to share the news, and then I'd like to dig into it for a minute about the choices and where you're going and all that good stuff. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'll give
Yeah.
that to you.
Yeah, so I am going to be pursuing my graduate research at Tyler School of Art and Architecture this fall.
Oh wow.
Just decided, and I'm really excited. It might be, you might have a better read on this. I feel like I'm going a little bit later to grad school than a lot of people do. Um, I'm 33, I would be 35 when I graduate, but um, I'm really excited for the opportunity to focus on some of the ideas that I'm interested in and see how they can be woven together and kind of crystallize some of those thoughts and also just some technical skill with glass.
Well, first off, congratulations. I'm so excited for you. And what I find so interesting in this is I think you have a career as an artist, you're doing it. And so the reason that you're returning makes the most sense because you have some footing underneath you. You
Mm,
understand your materials and you want to be pushed further. And so I think you're in actually a really healthy spot. I actually think that a lot of artists go into their MFA too young.
mm,
And I would even say for myself, I probably could have used a few more years outside of the academic world just to get my footing a little bit clearer.
yeah.
Um, because I think having that base can allow you to not be pushed by the winds of opinion and strong personalities that can come in. Although I think it's different now in grad school, I'm not sure. But
Mm,
so I think it's awesome. And I love just that you're like, I want to have this time and space to dedicate to thought, to dedicate to materials. I'm just really excited to see what happens. And I think it's an encouragement for other artists who may be thinking about something similar and are grappling like with, do I do this? Do I not do this? So I'm just so excited for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it is like a huge decision to go to grad school, and there it is like can be like a real halt in your life if you work full time, or maybe you're doing your art part time and teaching or something. But I think it can be such an interruption. But you know, something to think about, like, I've had a number of people tell me don't go to grad school. um, which I think is, like so interesting. There there are a lot of people saying like, well, if you don't want to teach and you don't want to like feel like you need to generate connections, then why would you do that? But I really am more interested in learning both technical skills and gaining a better sense of my, you know, contemporary and historical context, um, kind of in tandem with that technical exploration. But you know, there's the viewpoint that you could just like, well, there's lots of other ways to learn. There's like NYC Crit Club in New York. I went out to this glass school, Pilchuck, out in Seattle, which is amazing. You can do residencies, and there's just so many awesome ways to get plugged into a community, to learn some skills. And I'm a huge advocate of those things. I did NYC Crit Club, I did Pilchuck, and I've done residencies. um, but I think if you can go to grad school and have that be funded, that actually might be the more economical choice, because these one-off growth experiences can be costly. And so for me with grad school, the goal was really like, I don't want to pay because that's kind of been the consensus in the art world, is like, don't pay for grad school. And if you want to pay for grad school, like, I'm totally in support of that. And I think like what's best for you. But I was taking very seriously like the advisement of artists who I respect and who cared about me and were advising me accordingly. And so um, I applied to two schools that were free with a stipend just upon admission. That's just part of their programs, like OSU and Tulane. Those schools, like, if you get in, that's free, and you get a stipend, and you're also kind of a junior faculty, like, as soon as you're in there, but um, you don't have to take on debt, which is huge. Um, and then some other schools that I applied to just had some funding available, like VCU, like Tyler, um, where you can get, maybe if you apply, you have the opportunity to receive that full ride or that stipend. And so for me, that was really the goal. And you know, as it really came down to like VCU and Tyler, and the financial packages were the same. But I ultimately saw that, Philly is just so uniquely positioned. It's right between DC and New York. And there's a lot of really great industrial studio space here. There's a great art community here. And so it makes sense for me to do my grad research here in Philadelphia. And so I'm really excited to kind of take that deeper dive here.
I'm so excited for you. And I think the reasons that you mention getting your master's and advanced degree are actually the right reasons, like what originally it was intended for, which was growth of your work, and depth of ideas and concept. And, then over the past 20 years, it kind of became something else, which, Columbia in the early 2000s, late 90s, it's like a factory for art stars, right? And then this whole other industry almost started with a master's degree. And now there's been a shift, I feel like, over the past maybe 10 years, where now there are these funded um programs, which is huge. And so I'm thankful that you're sharing this, because I think a lot of artists um are looking into this, or maybe wanting to learn more, that there are programs fully funded. And as you mentioned, these other learning opportunities are fantastic. They're wonderful, but many of them you have to pay for, and you're kind of cobbling together things. Whereas when you can get this great package, and time, I think that's the big part, is it affords you time to just work and not have these other things on your plate, because you're making money teaching, or you have a stipend, and you're really immersed. I'm excited for you. I think it's all coming together. And again, I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us, because again, whenever we can share our research or the things that we've done in our lives, it can help somebody else who's in a similar situation. So I think that's going to be really, really helpful. Um, well, Laura, this has just been a blast. I have enjoyed this time with you this morning, learning more about your work and what's going to be happening. Can you share with us where we can find you online?
Yeah, sure. My Instagram is laura.sallade. My website is laurasallade.com. And there's also like information on works available or bio of me on Massey Klein's website as well, where I'm represented.
I love Massey Klein, such a great space. Before I let you go, I would just love to ask you one more question for everybody, because you've had such great tips and thoughts so far. Is there a piece of advice that you've received that has really impacted you that you would like to share with the artists listening?
Um, yeah, I think there's one thing that sticks out to me. Um, oh man, now like so many things are coming to mind.
Share
But
them all. Take them.
one of my mentors in undergrad, Rob Resch, he said to me, you're gonna make art for maybe your whole life, and you'll come to the end, near the end, and realize you've actually been trying to say the same thing the whole time. And I I don't know that I really understood that at the time, but I think maybe I'm starting to get it a little bit. And I'm sure that I will understand more as time goes on. But I think that that assurance that you are going to keep saying the same thing is actually very freeing. It's helped me to really unapologetically explore my interests and trust that that thing that I'm trying to say is going to continue coming out. That I can trust, my voice is always going to be there. Um, I think that I'm constantly trying to turn outward and explore and um, think of my studio almost like a lab and discover, you know, more and more about material and the world around me. And I think that in that process, like this channeling of my work, there's just this inevitable sort of like picking up of my personality along the way as it's kind of like pulsing through me. That's kind of how I see it. It's like I don't have to worry about being original or unique or really making myself stand out. I think I have to concern myself more with like telling the truth and um, pursuing my interests and being authentic. And then, you know, you just end up being unique and original without even realizing it. and saying that thing that you've been trying to say your whole life.
Mm. I love that. I think there's such beauty in that because it's true, just by being able to embrace those qualities in yourself and in your work and be honest with that, which can be hard. Um, that allows you just to the freedom to be who you are, be who you were made to be, and that comes through in the work. It's like this process, this back and forth trust process, that occurs.
Yeah.
And that is so freeing. I wrote it down. I'm like, oh, that's such a great reminder. Mm.
Good. Yes. Embrace that freedom.
Oh, it's all about the freedom, right? I feel like being an
Yeah.
artist at its core, I think that's what we're looking for is freedom.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, Laura, thank you again so much for taking the time out of your day to be on here. And it was just really wonderful to chat with you. So thanks.
Yeah, you too, Erica. Thank you so much for having me. Such an honor to be here.
It was all my pleasure. All right.
You
Take care, Laura.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Wait, don't hang up, don't hang up, don't hang up. I forgot to tell you that before. Laura will cut that, or Caitlin will cut that out. Stop recording.